Forget about the fact of people getting rescued at the last moment. Do you know how hard it would be to shove a broadsword directly through someone's back? The amount of bones, vertebrae, muscle, organs, that would be tough to do.
Welcome back to On the Throne, the Shout on TV podcast companion piece for the incomparable HBO series Game of Thrones. I'm one of your hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Jor Mormont Lyons.
Chaos is a ladder.
And this is our fan email episode where we look back on this week's episode of Game of Thrones and provide our feedback on the top listener emails for the week, all part of a segment we call The Small Council. You listened to our ideas on Tuesday's Deep Dive. Now it's our turn to hear from you. Gene and Big D, our cup overfloweth. The amount of interaction that we're getting from the fans, whether it's on social media or in our inbox, we had to didn't we have to increase our storage? We're getting so much great feedback, good and bad.
It is killer just trying to keep up with the influx of email. The crazy thing is, we used to, even with Westworld, we would wait until our deep dive, and then after that, they started rolling in. This one, immediately after the Instacast, we were just getting pounded with letters to the Small Council.
The emails have been fantastic. They're coming in fast. We've decided to add a feature to the website to make it easier to find emails that we feature on the air. If you go to the actual podcast, so if it's Game of Thrones, Small Council, then you'll see read on the podcast. That way we post those. So if you want to read the full version of some of the ones that we have to truncate due to time, they're easy to find. So that's going to be on there tomorrow as well with all the emails posted.
Yeah, if you've never listened to Shout on TV or any of our podcasts, whether it's Westworld or Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, every podcast that we've done so far, we've included this as part of our weekly releases. We really love hearing from you, the audience. We really love that participation, that engagement. So if you want to be part of the show, email us, hosts@shoutontv.com. And even if your email didn't make it on air, because again, we take the 12 best, maybe it was a duplicate idea, or
somebody might have beaten you in by a little bit.
That's right. That's right.
But if you go onto the website, you'll see a lot of the emails that we didn't even read will have 4 and 5 comments from other people who are following the podcast or following Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's our own little version of Reddit over there at shoutontv.com. But thank you so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe, share with a friend. That being said, Gene, you did all the curation for this week. What do we have in store?
Lots of great stuff, starting with some pretty startling observations. We had multiple writers write in about Jon bending the knee. They feel that he already did, and they think that there are some tells in episode 4 that you might be interested in hearing. Also, some thoughts on who the big death will be this season. We did a poll on shoutontv.com, and based on the voting on that, it spawned a theory that is really interesting. Also talking about who Littlefinger really cares about. Here's a hint, it's only Littlefinger. Also talking about some of the tropes that happen in Game of Thrones, things that we've seen happen over and over again, so many times that they're not even callbacks anymore. They're just nauseating. Lots of talk about dragons, talking about the identity of Drogon, and also how hard it is to shoot down a dragon, a perspective from an army tanker, so that should be really good. Also, we have a little bit of a slap on the wrist for being unfair on Daenerys, talking about a lot about Jaime Lannister's story arc, the difference between Varys and Littlefinger, and of course we're going to round it out with our exceedingly popular actuallys. Last week we talked about how we had so few actuallys because we were getting our act together. We have 12 this week. So,
listen, if there's one thing you don't do to a Game of Thrones audience is have them prove their nerddom to us. Have them prove their intelligence and their knowledge of the vast Westeros history. So thank you so much for sending all those in. Those are really cool. So we'll make sure we round off the episode with that. With that being said, Big D, why don't you go ahead and open up the Small Council?
Shame. Shame. Shame.
Our first Small Council email comes in from Stacy G. She writes in, I'm wrong all the time, but I think Jon bent the knee in the Cave of Convenience. Evidence A. As you mentioned in the deep dive, Dany uses the same line on Jon that Jon used on Mance Rayder. The quote being, isn't their survival more important than your pride? A couple of more lines from Jon to Mance. You'd rather burn than kneel, a great hero until winter comes, and I think you are making a terrible mistake. Now, Jon is facing the same argument while wearing the other shoe, and he probably has Sansa's recent advice about not making the same mistakes of others that are now dead. Evidence B. During Dany's vent of frustration at recent events with the Unsullied, Davos said that they will need to discuss amongst yourselves as if Jon and Davos are not actually part of the group. Dany commands Jon and Davos with, "You will stay." Jon actually looks away towards the ocean before looking at Davos. Then she immediately asks for Jon's advice. Evidence C. Later, as they approach Missandei, she calls him Lord Snow, and Davos sputters about King Snow or King Jon, and Jon replies, "It doesn't matter." Evidence D. Davos asks Jon, "Will you forgive me if I switch sides?" How hard did Jon have to bite his tongue not to reply with, "You already have"? The reveal is still yet to come, but tiny bits of circumstantial evidence is there. Thanks, guys. And of course, this comes from Stacey G in Indiana.
I love this idea, and it's furthered by another listener who wrote in, Kara, who said, she says that while Daenerys is in the throne room, she's very frustrated, and she says to Tyrion, he refuses to call me queen, and then when they flash forward again, when Theon shows up on the shore, he says the queen is gone. So we have him at first refusing to call her queen, and then later when Theon shows up, he refers to her as the queen. I think that these are some slight hints that perhaps Jon has bent the knee, at least in his heart, if not verbally.
That would make sense given his efforts in this episode to go around and understand why people choose to follow Daenerys, and that it's choice and she may be something different. I like it. I think it's probably a 50-50 chance of it being right, but I don't know how a lot of the audience is going to feel. I think they're going to feel cheated.
Also, after reading a lot of your responses on Twitter, I tell you all to grow up, but you are listening to a podcast called Shat on TV. There were so many yeah, he's going to bend the knee. That's not all he's going to bend, and etc. Listen, Jon's had good luck taking young ladies into caves, so kudos to him. And I think Raj, you and I greatly miscalculated how many people want to see these two hook up.
Listen, I don't think that necessarily he's bent the knee, and the circumstantial evidence is that. I just think it's circumstantial evidence. Stacey, I love your email. I love the fact that you write in. I love that you listen to the show. But I think you're wrong here. I don't think that he's officially bent the knee. I think that Dany trusts Jon Snow a little bit more, probably because she's been forced into this. All of her strategy up to this point hasn't worked. So she turns to someone like Jon Snow. She's trusting him a little bit more after she saw what was in the cave. So of course she's going to ask for his advice. Now, Missandei doesn't believe that Jon is the king. She believes that Dany is the true queen of the Seven Kingdoms. So of course she's going to call him Lord Snow. The producers and the showrunners, the Double Ds, would not miss an opportunity for Jon Snow to bend the knee or to make claim that she's the real true queen of the Seven Kingdoms without showing us.
Well, regardless, I think she makes a good argument.
Thank you, Stacey, so much for writing in. The next Small Council email comes in from Tez. Tez writes in, "The death poll genuinely worried me simply because Tyrion got 0 votes. 0. Each character got at least some votes, except him. Nobody wants him to die, but come to think of it, there's no reason not to kill him. All the other major characters have some reasons to stay around, but not Tyrion. Jon Snow still has a lot to do with the Dragonglass, the White Walkers, etc., and he already died once, so I think he's the least likely to die this season. Jaime has to deal with Cersei before he goes down. Many people think he'll kill her at some point. If that's going to happen, he needs to stay around a little bit more so we can see the events leading to that. Daenerys isn't going down until at least one of the dragons dies. Also, she just started to get along with Jon, and I think they have a lot to do together. She'll probably be actively involved with the fight against the White Walkers somehow, or at least lead a much larger attack on Cersei, so I believe she still has time. Tyrion, on the other hand, has no reason to stay around. I think they even prepared his demise. He fucked up a lot recently with war plans. It's a trope. The beloved character suddenly starts making huge mistakes one after the other, does some awesome thing once more to redeem those mistakes, dying in the process. Also, Jaime will probably end up a prisoner again, where he'll get the chance to talk to Tyrion. He now knows for sure that Tyrion didn't kill Joffrey, and the two brothers have a special relationship but drifted apart, and now it's possible for them to have some closure in the next episode. And Jaime will sooner or later join Cersei again, when the two will have a fight, probably because of Tyrion. If Tyrion is dead at that point, the dramatic effect would be bigger. So to sum up, number 1, nobody wants Tyrion to die. Number 2, there's actually no reason he shouldn't die. And number 3, it would probably help the plot if he does. So I think it's going to be Tyrion who dies this season. So sad. What do you guys think? Best Tez from Berlin. We're global, guys. We're global.
I can start this one off. This is a really good argument. And when I looked at it, I thought, when I saw that number, that 0 votes for him, I thought, oh gosh, that's exactly where they're going to go with this. And it's one of those things where a lot of us, I think, dismissed it because Tyrion is supposed to be sympathetic. We're supposed to feel for him. He's small in stature. He's been shit on his whole life, but he's got the brains and he's got pluck, and you want to pull for him. Honestly, he wasn't even on my radar as a possibility to die. I think that this is a terrifying realization. And Tez, you're a dark, dark person.
Yeah, until you mentioned it in his email, I didn't realize he had 0 votes. The only one who hasn't had a single vote. We've all been lulled into this sense that he's safe because he always somehow seems to last. He's the true favorite of a majority of the fans, so we've taken it for granted. I haven't expected him to die, but after this email, I think I've been blinded.
All right, well, let me ask you this. Will Tyrion die before or after he rides the dragon?
I don't care as long as Robin Arryn dies. I want that little bastard to die.
It doesn't have to be before or after. It could be while riding the dragon. That's his act of heroism, right? He gets on a dragon, he has a moment of glory, and then poof.
What if because he's so little, he can't really hold on, and he ends up dying by falling off?
Oh, that's so mean. That's terrible. Why would you say something like that?
Why?
He has tiny little hands. He can't hold it. Come on. No, Tyrion made, there's reason to believe that if he can make Bran a custom saddle to ride horses after his accident, after he fell, then you would have to think that he has the ability to make a saddle that someone of his stature could ride a giant dragon.
So I'm fucked up for saying he's going to fall off the dragon because he has little hands, but it's okay for you to design some kind of child saddle?
That's exactly right. Listen, you're a dad. So you're not going to put your daughter in without a booster seat.
So now you're comparing a child in a booster seat to an adult man. Stop while you're ahead.
They're roughly the same size. Tez, I think it's a great email. I think it's a great point. Are we okay with Tyrion dying? Or is this a situation where he'd be one of the characters that the audience would revolt?
I mean, I want to see Tyrion on the Iron Throne, but, again, I'm in no way okay with him dying. But I think that from a writing perspective, it makes perfect sense.
Yep, absolutely. Tez, thank you so much for the email. The next Small Council email comes in from Juliana. Juliana writes in, when you guys were discussing the times Littlefinger betrayed the Starks, you mentioned Harrenhal and him marrying Sansa to Ramsay Bolton. Actually, you missed the first and the most major time Littlefinger betrayed the Starks. In Season 1, Episode 7, Ned has a conversation with Littlefinger in the Tower of the Hand. Ned tells him that King Robert has no true heirs to the throne and Stannis is the next in line to the throne. Ned asks Littlefinger for the support of the City Watch when he confronts Cersei and her Lannister soldiers. Baelish tells Ned he has the support of the City Watch. Later in the throne room, when Ned confronts Cersei and Joffrey, the City Watch turn on Ned and his men, allowing the Lannisters to take Ned as prisoner for treason. Littlefinger even holds a dagger to Ned Stark's throat and says, I did warn you to not trust me. Littlefinger is then rewarded by the crown with Harrenhal. Once Robb hears that Ned is being held as a prisoner in the dungeons below the Red Keep, he calls his bannermen to fight the Lannisters and rescue his fathers and sisters. Littlefinger only acts to promote Littlefinger. It has been seen in the seasons that he has also said it himself. You mentioned in the attempt of Bran's life, although it has yet to be determined who sent the assassin to kill Bran, some think it was Joffrey. I think it would be argued that when Robb called his bannermen and rode south to save his fathers and sisters and declared him king of the North, the war had begun. Since it was Littlefinger's betrayal of Ned Stark that led to his imprisonment, it could be said that he did in fact start the War of the Five Kings indirectly. You know nothing, you hosts of Shat on TV. This comes from the Queen Beyond the Wall, Juliana.
So yes, this was definitely an omission on our part. I was giving kind of some quick examples, and by no means a comprehensive history of the ways that Littlefinger is kind of connived. And other listeners wrote in to talk about essentially this notion of Littlefinger causing chaos. The chaos is a ladder thing. In many ways, he's interfered in all sorts of politics throughout Westeros. But this is the most glaring of his betrayals, and I apologize for not bringing it up in the deep dive.
Yeah, and I think what I meant on the deep dive when I said that Littlefinger hasn't portrayed the Starks, what I meant is the Stark children, right? He's probably not a fan of Ned Stark, certainly, but I think he's affectionate. He's always loved Catelyn, and therefore he's always loved the Stark children. Am I totally wrong there?
You're missing one big thing. He also helped kill the husband of Catelyn Stark's sister. So that's another betrayal of the family.
Also, Lysa, it should be pointed out that Lysa, it was more that she did not want her son to go to King's Landing that really motivated her to kill, not so much Littlefinger.
Yeah, I think he would just kind of prodded her along, push her along. But you are correct, Juliana. I do believe that he did have a hand in the War of the Five Kings. I don't think that he was the sole reason for it. Because by that logic, one could argue the boar had a hand in the War of the Five Kings.
Or at least a tusk.
Thank you so much for writing in. The next small council email comes in from Ariston. Hey guys, thanks for the work all you have done this season on Game of Thrones. It's the first season I'm listening to the podcast on the show for two reasons. Number one, I never was a huge fan of the existing podcast. And number two, I listened to every one of your Westworld podcasts and it was beyond entertaining and insightful. You guys even got me to watch the old movie prior to the show's official airing. Anyway, here's my pet peeve that is along the lines of cliffhanger trope, which I agree are terrible. They're the Applebee's of TV writing. They work fine for big audiences, but anyone with good taste finds them repulsive. My friends think I'm crazy, but there's another horrible trope that Game of Thrones is pretty guilty of, and that is whenever a main character is in a sword fight and his assailant has him on the ropes, he's about to die when another character that we know happens to be in the right place at exactly the right time to stab said assailant in the back. This happened this week with Dickon and Jaime. It also happened with Howland Reed and Ned, and it happened with Tyrion and Podrick. And of course, it's happened many, even more times throughout the course of the series. I've always been bothered by this, and I wondered why no one ever talks about it. I'm writing to you guys because I can no longer stomach elevator conversations on TV and cinema after listening to both your Westworld podcasts, so thanks for that. And this is along those same lines. Both are overused plot devices that to me come off as lazy writing. Thanks, guys, and keep up the good work. Ariston.
Yeah, another one that as soon as I read this that I thought of was Battle of the Bastards. Tormund also, I think, rescues Jon Snow, kind of the same thing. But this is something we've seen over and over and over again. And it's weird that it didn't click for me. I think it's a testament to how well they execute these battle scenes that I didn't even notice how often this happens. But now that I've seen it, I can't get it out of my head. I'm disappointed in myself for not noticing, Ariston, that this is happening. It is rampant in Game of Thrones.
I like it. I think honestly, they're showing that battle, particularly in this time, is dirty. People aren't going to square off and face their enemy. People are shanking each other in the side. People are sneaking up. I'm surprised, and I want them to show more fratricide. When you're swinging the swords around, Dothrakis are going to spin around and accidentally cut another Dothraki. So I like it. I think it's more realistic.
Well, I mean, I get that part, but the point is that it's the way it's shot. It's like, oh no, he's gonna die, and then ba-da-da, like so. It's always the sword emerges first through the guy's chest, and then the body clears away, and then it's his friend, yay, And again, and most notably, I think it's also to make us like the person, right? So Tormund does it, then we're like, oh, Tormund's cool. Then it's like, oh, Dickon's cool now because he stabbed somebody in the back.
Well, maybe they're lulling us into a false sense of security. Another one of our favorite characters is going to be in that situation. We'll be waiting for the sword, and it won't come.
But, that's okay with me. That's why I enjoyed this battle, this loot train battle, this battle of the Burninator, is that none of the characters died, seemingly, that we know of yet. None of them died, and that was a little bit different. But now, like you said, Gene, every time I see a battle on Game of Thrones, I'm going to think, well, who's going to come and rescue Jon Snow? And hopefully they're lulling us into a sense of false security, maybe with Tyrion, where you think someone's going to save him, and then he dies. There would be some satisfaction to that.
You know who did that beautifully is in Saving Private Ryan. There's that upstairs struggle between Mellish and the German soldier, and the knife's at his chest, and you think somebody's going to come and shoot him, and he just slowly presses it in his chest. That was a fucking intense scene.
Oh, God. Or they're on the bridge, and you think, because at this point, everyone has died. They're all alone. They're trapped. And then all of a sudden, the P-40 Mustangs? What are they?
P-51s.
P-51 Mustangs. They come in, and they rescue, but still Tom Hanks dies.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, sorry. But speaking of P-51 Mustangs, I mean, people have made that same comparison to the dragons in this episode.
Forget about it. We're getting hung up on this. Forget about the fact of people getting rescued at the last moment. Do you know how hard it would be to shove a broadsword directly through someone's back? The amount of bones, vertebrae, muscle, organs, that would be tough to do. I watched Mythbusters. They try to poke an analog, and a lot of times they use pigs. It's impossible. It would be really hard to do.
Hold on. Have you seen Dickon with his shirt off?
Yeah. Yeah.
That dude could push a dude through another dude's back.
I want him to push another dude through me. That's what I want. Show's gone off the rails. We have 7 more emails to read. Harrison, thank you so much for writing in. We agree with you. This is a consensus for the first time over here at Shat on TV. Thanks so much for listening. Our next small council email comes in from Kevin. Kevin writes in, hey, just a little tidbit about Dany's dragon riding moves. Dragons aren't really like horses. They know that they are dragons. They're very strong and hostile. So there really is no controlling what they do. Once Dany jumps on from there, it's pretty much Drogon's choice. At least in the book, she says Drogon steers towards danger to attack rather than flee. Love the show, Kevin.
This is brilliant, Kevin. It's a factor that we never took into consideration. We're like, why is he flying slow? Why is he attacking when he's on the ropes? And I think I'd assumed that Daenerys could steer him any way that she wanted, that she was under complete control. But the dragon has a will of his own. If provoked, perhaps if shot at, it arouses anger. And like you said, there's a personality to the dragon himself that says, he may be careless, he may be aggressive, and in that case, not think of his own well-being.
I think we have to believe that she's controlling the dragon somewhat. They respond to a verbal command of Dracarys.
Right.
So there's no way that this dragon is going to risk, with its mother on its back, doing something crazy and turning wild. For all intents and purposes, this is a domesticated dragon.
Yeah, listen, there's some people have assumed, well, she's Targaryen, and Targaryens have a special bond with dragons, and they can somehow telepathically or somehow via avatar, they control these flying beasts. No, she's raised them like I've raised my dogs, my little dragons. They respond to verbal commands. They respond to nonverbal cues, such as your hands, in certain ways. And they know how to move based on my commands. So I have to look at it in the same vein.
I changed my opinion because your dogs do not listen to you.
They do listen to me. So they're very well trained.
So then I agree with the email. Kevin, you're correct.
If you want a untrained dog, Jean's dog doesn't listen to anything. She just bites people. She
bites you.
She bites everyone.
She's bitten you in chat. That's it.
Thanks so much for writing in, Kevin. Our next small council email comes from Luke. Luke writes in, okay, 2 things. Number 1, are you sure it was Bronn who saves Jaime from being turned to ash? It didn't give a clear shot of who saves him, so I think there might be a possibility of someone other than Bronn saving Jaime, maybe young Tully. And number 2, is Drogon going to live? I understand it's a dragon and that they will heal well, but hang in there for this theory. All the dragons are named after certain people. Drogon was named after Khal Drogo, who was killed by a wound near his shoulder that festered. The same place Drogon got hit with the arrow. Coincidence? Could this be the demise of one of Daenerys' dragons? Love your podcast. Keep up the good work. Regards, Luke.
So I want to tackle the first one before we get to the juicier second one. Yes, I am sure it's Bronn who saves Jaime from being turned to ash. I have debated this with people online, and it's driving me nuts in the sense that they keep mentioning the horse. Here's this amazing thing that we have in 2017. It's called TiVo. It's called the internet as well, but you can freeze frame and notice the characteristics of the rider that saves Jaime. 1, he's wearing fingerless gloves. Bronn has fingerless gloves. 2, he has hair down to his shoulders. Pretty sure that Dickon does not have hair down to his shoulders. And 3, and perhaps the most important, is in a full frame shot of his body leaping from one horse to the other, you see that he is wearing leather, complete leather, no armor on. So there is no way at all, although I thought it would be a better device and more realistic, there is no way at all that this is Dickon.
Well, not only that, but I posted on our Facebook page the proof points, the screenshots, the screen grabs of this, where evidence will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it is Bronn who saved him. Plus, it would go along with the story arc and the narrative. Wasn't there also like a scene of Bronn when he got knocked off the horse that he turns and sees a white horse, riderless?
Yes,
that same white horse that he jumps off of to save Jaime. So, of course, it's Bronn.
Now, again, I hate this because of the fact that Bronn has now, escaped death like twice. He jumped on the thing. The dragon burns everything around him, but he rolls 10 feet away and is somehow unharmed. Then finds a horse, gets on it, and then goes. I mean, it's highly unlikely, but at the same time, it is who the show chose to save Jaime. So,
well, just wait till next episode when he dives down 100 feet in the water and pulls up an armored Jaime Lannister.
He actually drinks all the water out of Blackwater Rush. And they sing songs about it.
Son of a bitch. That is the only way they're going to save him. They're going to use the dragon as like a crane. That's going to be terrible.
Well, welcome to Off the Books. Number 2, though, is talking about dragons. This is a pretty juicy theory that I think has some symbolism behind it, and I could totally see the Double D's doing this.
What killed Drogo?
A festered wound.
The wound didn't kill him. It was the poisoning that killed him. So unless somebody comes along like a bad vet with a vendetta, that's the only thing that's going to happen.
No, but Raj mentioned in a theory earlier that he thinks that the bolt itself was already poisoned, hence the name Scorpion.
We did not see Bronn doing any kind of special care or treatment to that. When we saw the Red Viper fighting the Mountain, you clearly saw his squire treating the blades right before the battle. You can't just treat them and then throw them out into the box, the transformer you called it, and expect the poison to work.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think the tip is poisoned because you're right. They didn't airmail that into us. It would be cool. It would be a cool device. And if the fact that they didn't show the audience and the audience had to think back to when Oberyn fought the Mountain. But you're probably right. It was more probably to show that the dragons can be wounded, and they'll just produce more of these scorpions and put them out on the battlefield, unfortunately, which I really don't want to happen because I don't want any of the dragons to die. But Luke, great questions, great email. Thank you so much for writing in. Well, keeping on that same topic of the scorpion, our next Red Keep Small Council email comes in from Todd. Todd writes in, "Ooh, this is the guy. This is the army guy, Gene, right?
This is the army guy.
This is the army guy. We got another army guy." Big D.
I feel like I got a flash to Roger's childhood as he's meeting yet another stepfather candidate.
That's right.
Mom, is this the army guy?
Mom used to take me up to, this is a true story. Mom used to take me up to Bennigan's and give me a roll of quarters to play Pac-Man while she searched for a new stepdaddy for me.
So how many Todds did she go through, just out of curiosity?
There were a few Todds. I think I spent a night over at a Todd's house once on a sleep-out couch. Yeah, it was while he was banging my mom in the next room. So I like to use occasionally the podcasts for some therapy sessions, so I appreciate that. Anyway, Todd writes in, if this is that fucking Todd, I swear. No. One of the hosts mentioned that it seemed a bit far-fetched to be shooting at dragons with a ballista. Number 1, I'm kind of surprised ballistas haven't been seen yet in Game of Thrones. They're a natural progression for this genre of military technology. Granted, this is a particularly well-designed, well-balanced ballista, but whatever. It seemed very believable to me. It would be my answer for, what the heck do you use to combat dragons? Number 2, shooting at dragons with a ballista. I've spent 9 years in the U.S. Army on tanks. Today's ballistae, if you will, i.e. a heavy direct-fire weapon system, some of the most fun I've ever had in the military was when we were engaged by attack helicopters in a mock combat, think very sophisticated laser tag. These things were fast and extremely dangerous. They could cause heavy damage, but we could and did engage with them and shoot them down during our training. Loads of people said that we couldn't be effective, especially the helicopter pilots, until we started taking them out. Fighter jets were way too fast for us to track and shoot, but not helicopters. They were fast, but not fast enough to hit them with our bolt, a tank sabot round. Is it sabot? Sabot round.
Yep.
A tank sabot round is an 18-inch rod. The scenes in this episode reminded me precisely of that time in my life. Utterly believable. Imagine later in the show if they have 4 or 5 of these weapons. The importance of seeing the ballista come out during this battle is that they are no longer a mystery, and Daenerys will now be ready for and expecting them. I'm sure the producers had the dragon come in low for simply dramatic effect, but tactically, this makes a lot of sense as well. A low-flying dragon causes more damage because people lose track of where it is and can't react as easily and therefore take defensive action. This also enhances that other weapon, terror, as in, dear God, where's the fucking dragon? Anyway, thanks for the podcast, Todd.
Yeah, I think this is a great email from Todd. I had a lot of doubt regarding this, and I realized that I've kind of contradicted myself in saying, stop arguing the physics of dragons, yet at the same time I was like, how the hell did Bronn single-handedly arm, aim, and fire this thing 3 times? It seems a little unrealistic. But at least here we get some explanation as to why the dragon's flying so low, harder to track, yes, and also put it within range. I think we saw some people pointed out that the range of the fire was particularly, it was finite in the sense that the dragon couldn't fly from 1,000 feet up and fire down, but also that it is possible to shoot down. If it's possible to shoot down a helicopter, it should be possible to shoot down a dragon.
I agree. If we had a couple batteries of these anti-dragon weapons and you spread them out, it would make attacking the front line much more difficult. You'd need to send the Dothraki in early to take them out, because 3 or 4 of these, if you train up some people, Bronn hadn't shot it. Get 3 or 4 soldiers who can get out there and practice with it, you're going to take one down. So maybe that's why the show explained, or Qyburn, when he has the conversation with Cersei, that this took all the blacksmiths, however much time, trying to show that they can't just produce 50 of them and line the walls of King's Landing.
Big D, you were airborne in the army.
Yeah.
Did you ever participate in these type of war games?
Yes.
These type of training?
It's called Miles gear, is what he's talking about.
And did you ever get shot down by tanks when you were in the helicopter? Did you mostly ride in helicopters? You didn't fly the helicopters.
No.
You weren't a pilot.
I was airborne air assault, so I jumped out of planes, repelled from helicopters. But no, I was never shot up by a tank.
Okay. All right. I had to ask.
Did you ever get hit by an 18-inch rod?
No, but
he got hit by an 18-inch from a guy named Rod.
But as a young soldier when I first joined, and we were in one of these large JRTC, which is in Fort Polk, Louisiana, a helicopter went by, and I carried the 240 Bravo, which is the modern-day M60. I threw the legs up on the top of the Humvee and started ripping through rounds, shooting at this helicopter. My platoon sergeant goes, "What the fuck are you doing? You're not going to take that thing down," because I guess the Miles gear that we have wouldn't necessarily register on it. So he's like, "Put that fucking thing away." I'm like, "Sorry, Sergeant." So that's my experience shooting at a helicopter.
You ever shot at a dragon?
No, I would have been running.
All right. Thanks so much for writing in, Todd. We really appreciate it. Our next email comes in from John. John writes in, "Hello, all. Just listened to your instant response to Season 7, Episode 4, and I wanted to raise a point about the criticism of Daenerys taking Drogon low in response to seeing an arrow from Qyburn's crossbow. Unlike the audience, Daenerys hasn't seen the crossbow fired at a low trajectory, so immediately wouldn't assume that the weapon could be reorientated to fire at that degree. Taking Drogon low is a logical response based on her level of knowledge. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Daenerys remains inexperienced at warfare, so it reflects her character, as does that she continued to be involved rather than fleeing from the battle after the first arrow. Daenerys has a bloodlust on her when her blood is up, so I found her actions during this scene very consistent. The foreshadowing for a dragon being killed continues. The injury sustained in Marines' fighting pits in Season 5, this injury now, and my prediction is that an ice giant with a bow and arrow will kill one of the 3 dragons later. Daenerys knows that King's Landing is armed with crossbows, so will be more careful in future engagements with the Lannister alliance. Having discovered you during Westworld, where everyone shared the journey together, my experience of these podcasts on Game of Thrones is different because we all carry baggage to the series. It is a much more challenging experience and often find myself in disagreement with the comments being made. That's the fun of a much more mature world. I shall continue my listening from the UK. My regards to you all, John L.
I'm going to take a different approach at this. Daenerys is inexperienced, and she can make some incorrect assumptions. The first run that she comes down at Jaime, and Jaime has the archers shoot at her, the arrows bounce off of Drogon's chest. She may assume that the arrow that Bronn is shooting would do the same thing. She's inexperienced. There's no reason she would expect that to penetrate. So that would make her lack of identifying the true threat understandable.
That's a dimension I never even thought of, Big D, and I think that's a great observation, is that, yeah, Drogon just took a bunch of fire from these archers, and it did no damage at all. Why would you assume that anything, up until this point, she literally thinks that these dragons are invincible, that they're impenetrable, except for they were injured in the fighting pits of Marine. So she does have some worry about them, but just not necessarily from projectiles.
Yes, but she also remembers they were much younger and smaller. At this point, she's assuming they're almost indestructible.
You have to imagine that there's some sort of armor, natural armor on the dragons.
Yeah.
Correct? Like the scales, the underbelly.
Yeah, dragon scales.
Dragon scale, yeah.
In fact, in most RPGs, dragon scale armor is a high premium.
That's factually correct. So I think you have to imagine, by the laws of physics, and if you have any physics teachers, the lower you go, the closer you are to the scorpion, the more damage it can inflict, correct? But the higher you are, due to physics, due to wind resistance, due to the fact that it's going to lose velocity because of gravity, it's probably not going to go in as deep, right? So you have to imagine that the one that hit his shoulder was probably more of a flesh wound. It probably didn't go very deep. Danny's just not strong enough to pull it out.
Oh no, it looks like it's in there pretty good, and these things are barbed too, so I think it's hooked into the flesh there.
Aha.
So, I mean, Drogon was flying pretty low. As Big D mentioned on the Instacast, you can actually see the water rippling from underneath his belly as he's flying over Blackwater Rush. So he's pretty low.
I just don't want these dragons to die, guys. I really don't. Please don't die.
Take care of your dragons.
Yeah, and listen, 4 or 5 scorpions still is no match for all 3 dragons. So, I mean, they would have to have at least 10 to 15 of these.
Yeah, dude, give me 8 of them, spread them out. You're going to take down one of the dragons.
Put them into a killing zone, something like that?
No, you spread them out. You have them so that they can cover the perimeter. So that way you can't just take them all out in one strafing run.
Got it. Our next Small Council email comes in from Cody G. Cody G writes in, Raj, my wife Jessica just turned me on to your On the Throne podcast. She said to hit you up with some of my theories. So here you go. The no-brainer is that the books are part of A Song of Ice and Fire. It was obvious right away that fire refers to Daenerys Targaryen, but we only began to speculate that Jon Snow was a likely representative of ice. Of course, his bastard blood is sure to be Targaryen, royal. This finally got some play in the TV series when Jon met Daenerys. It seems like they are moving forward towards a conclusion of a Jon-Daenerys-ruled 7 kingdoms fighting the White Walkers. But before they solidify their victory, they will have to take down Cersei and Jaime. The resolution I would like to see here is as follows. Cersei, knowing that she's about to lose the final battle at King's Landing, becomes the proverbial Mad Queen, batshit crazy, and commands the city be burnt down with wildfire. Jaime, torn between his love for Cersei and saving the city, again chooses to do the right thing, thus adding Queenslayer to his title. He kills her, and then kills himself as he can't live without her. In the process, Brienne of Tarth becomes Queensguard to Daenerys, and she finishes off writing about Jaime's exploits, including how he killed the Mad King to save the realm, and then added regicide by killing his sister, the Mad Queen, again saving the realm. Jeez. That would be pretty sweet, don't you? Cheers. Love the podcast. Cody.
I was with you for a little bit of it. It went down some crazy ass detailed hole. I hope this isn't some spoiler we've been baited into reading. But there's no way that Jon and Daenerys end up ruling together because people would like that to happen. George has already said it's going to be a bittersweet ending. Anything that would make people happy, I wouldn't expect it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a way to surprise people. Here's the thing, is that people don't want to see Jon and Dany together. Deep in their hearts, they really don't. We don't watch this show because things work out. If we watched this show because things worked out, we would have all stopped at the Red Wedding and been like, fuck this. We would have all stopped at the end of season 1 and just been like, fuck this shit. No, we want things to go horribly wrong. In our heart of hearts, we really do. And here's the thing, is that you could surprise people by disappointing, by letting them down, actually by having them marry. But that would be like the worst. It would be like, oh, I hated that. And I hate this show. You need to have it say, I hate that, but I love the show, which is what they're so good at doing.
But I believe Cody is correct here. I do believe that Jaime will do some sort of soap opera-y, kill his queen, who he loves, a little bit of Romeo and Juliet, a little bit of Shakespeare death there at the end. But I don't know. Is this a little too on the spot, on the nose? Do you think this is really, truly what's going to happen?
I mean, I'm always the first to raise the flag of fan fiction, and it always happens this way. And God, we had it all the time with Westworld, where it was, okay, so we saw that the man in black has a black hat, and he sets it on the table. That's the same table that Dolores touched, and so he's probably her father. And then we're going to see flashbacks where he was raising her and the mother was absent, and therefore he had to build a robot that was just like her so that he can make it up to his daughter that he abandoned when she was young. And it's like, whoa, what are you bringing, Cody? What are you bringing here? Is this some baggage with you? Do you want to kill the king? Do you want a large woman to protect you? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. I think Cody's on to something here. Thanks so much for writing in, Cody. Our next small council email comes in from Travis. Travis writes in, Jaime Lannister's arc in the show and the books is one of the most compelling developed by George R.R. Martin. His relationship with Cersei is almost wholly unwound already in the books, as Jaime has abandoned a call to return to King's Landing to be Cersei's champion. As we see in the show, Jaime is still very much committed to his twin and true love. However, I think this last episode changed that for Jaime. First, Jaime found out that his brother did not kill Joffrey. He never believed this, but he now has a confession from Olenna Tyrell that she did, and he will confront Cersei with that information. Second, Jaime witnessed a horrific event, the Field of Fire 2, which gave him flashbacks of the Mad King. He saw his men incinerated into ash by Daenerys and Drogon. Third, Jaime made the rash decision to charge at Daenerys, hoping to end the war in one moment like he did with the Mad King. This wasn't a dumb choice if you think about it, but he failed and either died for it, he didn't, or will make his way back to King's Landing defeated. It is when Jaime returns to Cersei and tells her all about this that their relationship will change. He will see the odds that are stacked against him and beg Cersei to surrender for the good of the realm. She will refuse and say that they will go down fighting. Jaime will be confronted by two scenarios, both of which will see victories for the Mad Queens in his opinion. And when Cersei continues to demand Tyrion's death for Joffrey's poisoning, Jaime will finally have had enough. I think this is a fitting internal duel created for the Kingslayer. Keep doing what you do. Travis M. from Morgantown, West Virginia.
So again, we've got somebody who wants to see Jaime kill Cersei. We get it. Everybody wants to see Jaime kill Cersei. One thing that Travis points out that I did not consider is that when Jaime is seeing everybody burned alive, he's seen this before. And that has got to, when we saw the expressions that he had, the way that this event shook him, for me, I thought it was the awe of the Dothraki charging down the plain or seeing the dragon. But there's more to this than that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Again, I'm on the same point. I was just like giving you thumbs up because I did not remember that. I didn't even think about that. But you're right. It makes so much sense. And I love the detail of the show. And when people say, oh, you're a little dragon soap opera on HBO, people who've never seen it, they dismiss it. But the level of detail that the show harkens back to is really quite brilliant. And it makes sense of why he would take a spear and charge Daenerys because he's done this before. So, probably someone who hadn't done this before would probably run. Someone like, Bronn but the fact that this has happened before, the fact that he could end it in one fell swoop, but doesn't, I think spells a lot to his character. Now, I don't believe that he's going to make it back to King's Landing. I think he's going to become a hostage. I think he's going to become a negotiating tool for Tyrion, for Daenerys, for Jon Snow.
Courtesy of the Dragon Crane.
That's correct. Our last and final small council email comes from how would you describe this person, Gene?
So I actually had a talk with her recently, and she no longer wants to be associated with anything even remotely phallic. So I do apologize, Gillian. I made a joke in poor taste because of one email that you wrote us, and in fact, all the other ones you wrote us were more about some pretty deep insights into the show. And I think this is actually the show that you have the biggest knack for is Game of Thrones. You really tear it apart, and your stream of consciousness is deeply appreciated.
Yeah, we put a little Easter egg into this last deep dive where we bleeped out every reference to the D word, and people were emailing us saying that why are you bleeping out curse words? We didn't bleep out curse words. We only bleeped out the dick word twice.
Please accept that as an apology from us to you, Gillian, and thank you for writing in with this amazing letter to the Small Council.
As always, Gillian writes in much longer than we can read here for time, but you can read it all on the website, shadowntv.com. She writes in, Varys is doing everything for the good of the realm. So if he really is, and I fully subscribe to this theory, if he is the one on the council who is betraying Dany, it is not because he has it out for only himself and to better his place and whatever other selfish reasons one would have to hurt others. Maybe Varys did what he did and formed his birds of the plans to come in order to do what he felt was best for the outcome of this war. Maybe he knew that Dany pairing up with Olenna Tyrell, the Sand Snakes, and the Greyjoys was not going to give her true followers, that they were all in it for their own selfish desires that would hurt Cersei. None of them were there for their love of Daenerys. Maybe he did what he did to shed her of the people who only came to her side when it benefited them, and not out of love for her. Maybe he also sees that she can be unhinged at times and have traces of a mad king way about her, and he's also pushing her to the brink of her wits to see how bad she will go. Ultimately, I think it should be stated, a king or queen is clearly only as good as their council. If you surround yourself with shitty council members, you too will be a shitty king. If you do not have people that either tell you you are wrong and can't do something, or you have people who tell you that you should do something drastic that will only blow up in your face, then you have become a terrible king. What we are seeing now, that Dany could have easily went off the rails at least 3 times now, for just in Westeros, if it were not for Tyrion and Jon and Missandei and Varys, without these people guiding her and telling her, look, we all want Cersei to die, but you can't do this, she would be no better than the Mad King. In the alternate, Cersei is up there sitting on the throne with no counsel besides Qyburn, who clearly is just as deranged as she is, and Jaime, who will never tell her no. This allows Cersei to be as bad as she is. So, I think this whole let's focus on the fact that Dany is neither good nor bad. She is a good person who can do bad things, or she's a bad person who does a lot of good things. Either way, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of this day, it's who she surrounds herself that will ultimately decide if history will choose to remember her as good or as bad. And this, of course, comes from Gillian.
So I would recommend that everyone listening to this podcast, please go to the website and find Gillian's emails. As eloquent as she is, and her ideas are well thought out, there's a sequence that, bridge a binge drinking episode. So she starts off with an immediate email where she's starting to drink. Then she gets very intoxicated. Then she writes back a few hours later. So this email you're reading right now is when she says herself, I've had a few hours since my last message. The buzz is finally wearing off. I've had my 3rd rewatch. So she's binge drinking, watching the show 3 times, and writing these absolutely amazing emails. Please go comment. She deserves the credit for her fantastic work.
Gillian has a Tyrion-style level of alcohol ingestion, but no, I think she's spot on here. I do believe that who you surround yourself with truly makes you whether or not you're a good or a bad. But by that logic, Robert Baratheon should have been the best king that Westeros has seen in years.
He's sharing a bed with one of the most devious, diabolical women in Westeros. Ned wasn't there laying in the bed with him.
That's what I want to see. I want to see the spinoff of that. I just want to see Robert and Ned, young Ned, just frolicking around the forests. No? Not coming with me on that? All right. Well, that does it for this week's emails for the Small Council. Let's go ahead and close up shop and do our actuallys. We've got a bunch of them. Actually, there's nothing more that nerds love than correcting other nerds on their love of Game of Thrones. That's where actually comes from. This all is culled from our social medias and our emails. If you want to be a part of actually and you think you've got something really, really good, either tweet at us with the hashtag actually or email in with the title actually, and we'll read it on air. Gene, the first one.
All right, the first one comes from a regular writer. Actually, there is another somewhat famous Valyrian blade in the books, a Valyrian arach, the Dothraki half-sword, half-scythe, wielded by a sellsword captain called Kago Corpsekiller, who was last seen in A Dance with Dragons in Meereen during its siege. If the show decided to make it appear, I bet it would be with Dario Naharis, should he go to Westeros somehow. And that comes from Tiago.
I like that last name, Corpsekiller. So obviously he was killing corpses. He was killing whites with it, right? It's a very Star Wars-y kind of last name, like Lightbringer and Starkiller.
I love the way Rod said he was going to just let us talk and he was going to sit back. I'm going to show you the audio files of what you sitting back looks like.
The next one comes in from Nick B. Actually, the little E at the end of your podcast means you can use profanity. You didn't have to bleep out dick. I believe we just talked about this, so there's really nothing more that we could say. It was an Easter egg, Nick. We were just trying to be funny. Sorry, won't happen again.
Next one comes from Greg. I don't want to take anything away from the Battle of the Bastards, and in fact, I agree that is one of the better battles of the series. Actually, I think the force field that prevents major characters from being hurt or killed in movies like Rambo, etc., was, in my opinion, nowhere else more present than in the Battle of the Bastards. If I remember, more arrows were shot and landed in close proximity to Jon in that battle than all the arrows shot combined in the Burninator. Greg, I disagree. If you know, Jon actually did get hit by an arrow. It took him right in the thigh, and it really messed him up.
The next one comes from Stephanie. Actually, Jaime's conversation about being spread too thin would lead us to believe only part of the train was destroyed, which would leave true rest of it as easy pickings. Olenna is pronounced O-Lin-A. God's Woods is the God's Wood. And there was just one more in the latest, but I can't remember it now. It'll come to me. Just discovered your podcast. Except for the mispronunciations, it's Perry. But as a book lover, it's really distracting.
I want to point out that Stephanie misspelled Jaime. It's Jaime. Also, she wrote, which would leave true rest of it. I think she meant the rest of it. And also, it's Perry. I think she meant it's petty. So, hey, we can both be petty, Stephanie. This one comes from Tom in New York City. Listening to Gene right now complaining about people who pick apart the minutia and physics of dragons flying. Wasn't he the one up in arms about how Bronn couldn't possibly operate a crossbow by himself? I call hypocrite. He picks apart minutia all the time. Tom, as a fellow New Yorker, I'm wounded by your betrayal.
Yeah, so this one's mine. This one came from Twitter. Actually, worst TV coverage podcast. Fuck Big D. And that came from Jared Lawrence. Thanks, Jared. I love you too.
Blow him up. Blow him up. Jared also, if you read his Twitter, he hates Spirit Airlines. So you're in good you're in good company there.
He also hates the Yahoo fantasy football app. Those are the two things that Jared hates in life. Oh, and me.
That's right. The next one comes from Noel. Actually, your theme music sounds a lot like Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes. Was this on purpose? Love the show.
Yes, it was.
That's exactly what it is. Seven Nation Army, different kingdoms all fighting. Anyway, that's what we did. We hope you like it.
Next one is from Luke. Actually, okay, not so much actually, but a question. Is it the Night's King or the Night King? Luke, I'm glad you asked. They're two different characters that people often confuse. The Night King is the guy who's with the White Walkers and the Whites, and they're attacking from the north there. That's the Night King. The Night's King was the 13th Lord Commander of Castle Black, who went north of the Wall, married a woman, and was making human sacrifices. So totally different characters.
The next one comes from Sarah. Actually, Game of Thrones takes place in Westeros, not Westworld. Forgive me, I haven't quite figured out whose voice belongs to whom yet, but one of you guys keeps calling Westeros Westworld, and it's driving me nuts.
Okay, Sarah, that was actually she's referring to the deep dive. Raj was making a joke because the set where Blackwater Rush is occurring looks exactly like the set of Westworld, so that's why he was calling it Westworld. He's aware.
Yeah. It was only in the beginning. Like, I don't think we ever called it. We've never called Westeros Westworld outside of just the beginning. Listen, when we introduce the show, the deep dive, I write a little funny blurb in the beginning. That's all it is. Just if you hate it, send your tweet responses to Roger_Roper on Twitter.
Actually, I was just listening to episode 4 Deep Dive Pod. You guys said Hodor and Sam were the only pure characters. Princess Ciaran?
Yeah, I wrote back to the guy. I was like,
That's
yep,
a good one.
You're right. Yep, Princess Ciaran was totally innocent. But I think what we were going for in the conversation, if I recall correctly, Gene, is we were talking about current characters that were still alive that were innocent. I'm not trying
Hodor's not alive.
I'm just, the question was to Gene, who was the last major character you cared about that died? That you cared about, that you genuinely had like an emotional attachment to.
Right.
And for as innocent as Ciaran was, it happened like how many seasons ago? A long time ago.
Wait, who's Ciaran? Is that your niece? What's going on there?
Ciaran is my niece.
Hey, is it possible to make an actually go into the next week's actually?
That's right. Next one. Actually, Stannis told Sam about the cave. The Dragonglass cave was common knowledge. It's easy to assume no one explored it.
And finally, we got a double hashtag. Hashtag actually. The message from Lysa the Cat came by Ryder, not a Raven. Hashtag just saying.
Yeah, both of these are absolutely correct. In fact, I posted a YouTube link that shows the conversation Stannis has with Samwell where he talks about the Dragonglass and how he has it at Dragonstone. So obviously people have been exploring these caves, but maybe they didn't see the drawings. I don't know. Cave of Convenience.
In addition, a lot of people, Raj, you did an incredible job apparently, because several people contacted me asking how we knew the name of the cave. So it's not actually called
That's right.
Cave of Convenience.
I can't take credit for that. There was someone who wrote in, and I can't remember who it was. He was either on Twitter or on Facebook, but they called it the Cave of Convenience. So whoever you are out there,
Brilliant.
I'll give. Yeah, it's Gene. Yes, Gene. Yes. Well, that concludes this week's episode of On the Throne Small Council. If you want to read all the emails in their raw and unedited version, just go to the website shadontv.com. Navigate to the Small Council, or in your little podcast app that you have in front of you. In the show notes, there's a link right there that Big D put in there. You can link straight out and see all the emails that are read here and the ones that didn't make it on the podcast in their full version. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That really helps the podcast grow. People are always asking us, do you have a Patreon site? Can we send you money? That may be in the works, but for now, if you really, really want to help us out, going to iTunes, going to wherever you get your podcasts, and rating us and sharing with a friend, telling someone who enjoys Game of Thrones. That's the way that you can help us. We hate begging for money. It's not in us, but maybe in the future we will. You can also, if you like us, check out our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we review the best 80s and 90s movies from our childhood that you, the audience, vote for. Check out all the information over at that website, shatthemovies.com. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Gene Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us on Sunday for our next Instacast. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, good night, and be sure to knock twice before you join us on the throne.